Hi there, dear friends. This is Bob Hatton, and I'm so glad that you join me again as we continue our journey to Bethlehem. Of course, although I keep on saying this, Bethlehem is a physical place, it's a geographical place in the Middle East, in Israel, which we're talking more about an attitude. We're talking more about the spirit of Bethlehem than the physical geographical place. And you know, when Jesus speaks in the so-called Sermon on the Mount, we have a section at the beginning which we call the Beatitudes, and he says, "Blessed are these and blessed are those." And at one point he says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, because they will be sons. They'll be called sons of God." And in John chapter 1 and verse 15, John writes there, and he says, "As many as receive him," Jesus, "he gives them power to be called sons of God." Now, that's what a Christian is. He's a son or a daughter, or she's a daughter of God. When we receive Jesus, we get this status. And actually, it's also the peacemakers who are the children of God, the sons and daughters of God. And now, go back to Bethlehem, go back to the man of Bethlehem. And I want today to introduce David, the king, as a man of peace, a man of reconciliation, and a man who was a peacemaker. We don't normally think of him being a peacemaker when we think of David. We think of David and Goliath and all his battles that he fought. David, the warrior, with blood on his hands. God said to him, "You cannot build the temple because there's blood on your hands. Your son Solomon, a man of peace, he will build the temple." But actually, David wanted peace. He wanted reconciliation between the house of Bethlehem, between the house of Judah and the house of Benjamin. He wanted these two tribes to come together. His first wife, and unfortunately David had a number of wives, but his first wife was a woman of Benjamin. She was the daughter of Saul. And he married her. For Saul, it was maybe a political alliance. He wanted to marry his daughter to a mighty warrior who would be useful for him in his battles. But actually, David saw something different than that. He could see reconciliation coming. His best friend was Jonathan, who was also from the tribe of Benjamin, the son of Saul. And both of these people, Michal, David's wife, and Jonathan, David's friend, they were often in turmoil because they had divided loyalty between David and Saul, the father. And unfortunately, both of them came to bad ends. Michal, she despised David when she saw him worshipping the Lord. She despised him because she thought he was doing things that were unworthy of a king. And then it says she died without having any children. So from this relationship of Judah and Benjamin, there was no fruit. No child was born with both genes in him. And of course, Jonathan, he died in battle at the side of his father. Now, there's another aspect as well. As David, he was king then of Judah, and a civil war started against the remnant of Saul's house. His son Ishbosheth, he became king of Israel for a short time, and he fought against David. And Ishbosheth's captain or general was a man called Abner. And David had three captains. They were his cousins, and one was a man called Joab, who we hear quite a lot about. And Abner, he's a strategic person. He is the one who is fighting the war. He's a strong man in Israel, and he has a difference of opinion with Ishbosheth. So he leaves him, and he comes over to make peace with David, and he wants to come join David's side. Now, previous to this, there had been a skirmish, and the younger brother of Joab had pursued Abner. And Abner told him to keep his distance and to stop pursuing him, otherwise it wouldn't be a good end for the cousin, for the brother. Now, he didn't listen to him, and Joab in the end, he turned around and he hit him with his spear, and Joab's brother died because of this. Now, Joab had just had feelings of revenge, and he was going to get his own back. One day, he would never forget this, and he'd get his own back on this guy, Abner. Now, Abner comes to David, makes peace with him. David accepts him, and that's another step to reconciliation. Now, Abner, he goes his way, and he notices that Joab has started to pursue him, and Joab wants to kill him. So Abner, he finds refuge in the city of Hebron, which was a city where it was a city of refuge, and that's where he went, and people looking for asylum could go there and they would be in safety. But Joab gets into the city as well, and he kills Abner, breaking all the rules and etiquette about the cities of refuge, breaking also his word, breaking the word of David, what David had given to Abner, that there is peace between them, because his thirst for revenge was greater than that. Now, when David finds out about this, he scorns his cousin, and he gives Ahab a honorable burial. He honors Ahab and he scorns his cousin. He honors his find and scorns his family. But this is very costly for David, but this is part of the process of reconciliation. And we continue to see this with David. When David then becomes king of Israel, he remembers his promise that he's made to Jonathan, his best friend. And he told Jonathan that if anything ever happens to you, then I will be kind to the people of your family. And then he remembers that one day, and he begins to ask, is there any descendants of Jonathan left alive? And he finds out, yes, there's a guy called Mephibosheth, who was one of Jonathan's sons. And Mephibosheth, he was living in a place, I've forgotten the name of the place, but the translation of it means nothing. And that's where he was living, a miserable life he had. He was full of shame because he belonged to the house of the king who had been deposed. He belonged to the family that had been defeated. He was also himself handicapped because the nurse that was carrying him when he was a small baby dropped him, and his legs were damaged, and since then he couldn't walk properly. He was handicapped, and there was a certain stigma about that in those days, as there is in certain parts of the world today. He was living in shame because of all of these things. And when David found him, he brought him into his house, and he made him sit at the table of the king. And he covered him, and he put a cloth over his legs so nobody saw that he was handicapped. He covered everything over. And that's just a wonderful picture of what Jesus does. He takes us. We were once his enemies, the Bible says. We were enemies of God, and he reconciled himself to us. He made himself one with us. He has forgiven us, and he makes us now sit at his table. You see, as many as received him, Jesus, he gave them the power to be sons and daughters of God. That's our status now. We are sons and daughters of God. It's not just, okay, you are forgiven, now go and sit in the corner and be good. No, he takes us in. We are part of his family. He has adopted us. We have the same Father as he has in heaven. We have an inheritance from him. We are allowed to sit at the table. That's what grace is. He's being kind to us, just as David was kind to Mephibosheth. And we all have the same status. You know, Jesus has torn down the walls of enmity. He's torn down the walls of enmity between different nations who've been fighting against one another. He wants us to forgive, live forgiven. He doesn't want us to look for revenge, but he wants us to be reconciled to one another. And that is not easy, but in the power of the cross, it is so possible. Well, that's it for today. Wow, isn't it good? Let's just celebrate this, that we've been reconciled to God and that we're just children of God. But that's so good. But my time's up now, so have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. You're Bob Hatton.